My name is Oluyemisi Oladejo, and an educator. I like to think of myself as an educator rather than as a teacher, because of being in the classroom at one time or the other in my life. But beyond the classroom, I also perform other activities in the field of education to help other teachers to work directly with policymakers. So I like to think of myself as an educator. Before I left Nigeria for the US on my Fulbright fellowship, I already worked as a classroom teacher of English language for 14 years. And in 2023, I went to the United States of America for my Fulbright Foreign Language Teaching Fellowship, where I had the privilege of teaching my native language, Yoruba. That's a native language. So I had the privilege of teaching my native language at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. So beyond being a teacher, I'm also a writer. I have a number of fiction and non-fiction pieces of writings to my name.
Hey.
And what else?
It's a rare opportunity. Only a few individuals get this privilege to visit USA, that too at the cost of US money. So I am really
I completely agree with you. I think being a Fulbright is a Fulbrighter is a big deal. It is a big deal because Fulbright is highly competitive, and to win this fellowship and get sponsorship to the US, all built on the US government. It is a rare privilege. It's something one will always be proud of.
As you know, that India is a huge country with a heavy population, and annually only 6 teachers are being selected for the Fulbright program. So I was privileged enough to be selected among the top 6 teachers in India in 2020. But due to the Corona COVID-19, I think my program was a bit delayed. But finally, I made my way to USA in 2022.
Oh, wow. Congratulations. So you were a cohort ahead of me. I went to 2020.
Yes.
Okay.
So I went to Arkansas University.
Hi.
Hi, ma'am. My name is Satvik. I am a 8th grader from ZPHS School, Elavaram. I would like to ask you one question, ma'am. Shall I ask, ma'am?
Go ahead, Satvik.
What are the primary skills that students need to develop to become writers?
Okay. The primary skills you need to develop so that you can become a writer. Did I get your question right?
Exactly. That's what he is asking.
Okay. First and foremost, I think it's quite important you get addicted to reading. So before you can think of being a writer, you must have read diverse books. You can't really venture into writing if you don't read. So as a writer, you are simply an addicted reader. That's something that cannot be negotiated. Also, as a writer, you have to be someone who pays attention to the environment, your environment. As a writer, you see what others don't see. You take note of situations that others fail to take note of. So to become a writer, you have to be attentive. You have to pay attention to details, apart from them being a non-apologetic reader. You have to take note of the happenings in your area, the happenings in your surroundings. Beyond that, as a writer, you really need to possess an analytical mind. By having an analytical mind, what I'm trying to say is that you don't just look at things on the surface. You look beyond the surface. You ask questions. When you hear a piece of information, for example, you try to process it. You ask questions. Why this? What? Where? The WH questions you need to ask. What? Why? Where? When? These are questions you try to ask yourself and give answers to. That's because writing is more of thinking than writing. So as a writer, you do a lot of thinking, possess the ability to think critically, and do not be afraid to take a stance. Do not be afraid to look at things differently from the ways others look at it. Do not be afraid to be different. As a writer, it's quite important for you to have a mind of your own. Do not easily bow to pressure. Or because every other person thinks this thing is good, I think it's good. No, that's not the mind of a writer. As a writer, you analyze the situation. You don't always follow popular opinion. You might be different. And that's a good thing about being a writer. So I think for your level, just focus on being addicted to reading and taking note of things in your environment. I'm saying this because a lot of writers will tell you that, oh, they have writer's block. They really don't know what to write about. I tell you, if you look inside your bedroom, let's say you have only one room and you live in a room. Inside your bedroom, there are hundreds of stories you can write. So you simply need to pay attention to the environment where you live, where you work. You need to pay attention to your interaction, daily activities with people, what someone has said, process it, analyze it, ask questions by yourself and answer those questions. By developing those skills, you hardly run out of ideas for writing. So let's leave it at that. I think your question, what
Yes.
grade level is this?
So actually, there are multi-graders here, and there are the seventh graders, eighth graders, and even ninth graders. Yes.
Okay.
So, yeah. Thank you so much. As you know that in this digital era, most of the students actually they are deprived of reading the printed material, and they always like to see the social media platforms, and they just check the social media platforms rather than going to the stories and books. So unfortunately, we are living in this 21st century, which is quite rampant with the digital platforms. So, but of course, there are a few students who will still like to read the printed material rather than the digital material available through online. So, what would you suggest this young generation to develop the habit of reading? So, as you have just mentioned that in your room, I think in every living room, we can write as many stories as possible, looking at each
Possible.
object. Yes.
Yes. So I think it's quite unfortunate that the emergence of social media is distracting the younger generation from books. But at the same time, I think it's important that we writers generally need to, and I like what I'm beginning to see in recent times. Writers generally need to take the stories to where the readers are. Readers don't come for books again. So writers should take the book to them. So I would say that one way by which we can encourage the younger generation to read is by making stories available, making reading materials available where young people gather. Where do they gather? They gather on TikTok, they gather on Facebook, they gather on social networking platforms, they gather on, the online places where these people gather. We should take books there. And I think it's high time writers explore publishing online. And when I mean publishing online, I'm not even talking about ebooks. I'm talking about short pieces, medium length pieces made available on social media. So that readers don't necessarily need to go out looking for hard copies of books to hold or looking for ebooks to download. Let it be that when they are scrolling on their social media platform, a post appears and it's a story and it captivates them. If you can't captivate readers, especially the new generation of readers, if you can't captivate them within the first 3 seconds, you've lost them. So let writers write more stories that the first two, three lines will captivate someone who is scroll stopping posts. And in the end, it won't be the regular post. It will be pieces of writing, the same pieces of writing, the same writing qualities we read in books. Bring those writings to social media, because this is where the younger generations converge. So let's take it to them.
Thank you.
Hi, how are you?
I am fine. Thank you, ma'am. How are you, ma'am?
Okay.
My name is Fahad Tabsun. I am studying 8th grade from JPH School, Ayalavaram. Here I would like to ask a question. Can I ask, ma'am?
Please go ahead with your question, perhaps.
Can you please tell us something about ETS grant?
Okay. Okay, the ETS grants. Okay. So ETS is simply an abbreviation for Education Testing Service. Education Testing Service is an organization that is headquartered in the United States of America. And what they do basically is to provide assessment tools, evaluation tools for teachers to assess students, like testing tools in education. So in 2022, I won the Education Testing Service actually has a lot of grants for educators, for teachers. They have awards and grants for teachers to encourage them, to help them, assist them to accurately assess students. So that's what most of the grants are all about. And in 2022, I had the privilege of winning one of those grants. And the name of the grants I won from Education Testing Service is the English Language Teachers, English Language Researchers and Practitioners Grants. So full English Language Teachers and Practitioners Grants. I won it in 2022. And as a teacher, at that time I was teaching children of your age. I was teaching students of your age, middle school students. Winning that grant allowed me to facilitate English language classes for young learners of your age brackets. It also helped me to test them, because at the time I was teaching in a low income school where my students had minimal access to computers. So winning that grant, gave me the privilege of procuring computers, projectors, microphones, and all other digital resources with which I was able to facilitate English teaching lessons for my students. And it's made a world of difference, actually, because learning was so much fun with computers. We were doing computer assisted language learning. So learning was so much fun, and we really recorded amazing, remarkable outcomes from that class. And before we had the study, the moment I won that grant from Education Testing Service, ETS, my learners were made to take a pre-study test where Education Testing Service tested my learners' ability, my learners' competence in English. So they tested them before we conducted the study. So we conducted a study for 6 months where I was teaching them with the digital resources and computers provided by ETS. And I was also teaching them in the digital classroom made available by ETS. So we did that for about 6 months. Yes, we did that for 6 months. Then ETS conducted another test on my students. And that test was post-study test. So by the time we compared the result of the pre-study test and the post-study test, we realized that these learners had come a long way. They had improved significantly because they now had access to computers, and learning was so much fun, which was a far cry from the traditional teaching and learning method that we had always used. And I think that's just about it, yes.
So how do you motivate your students to stick to English language, and so that we can create the English environment in the classroom?
Okay, thank you very much for that question. I would say that your situation is quite similar to mine, because English language is also a second language in Nigeria, but the category of learners I teach are from low-income backgrounds, where Yoruba is the first language. And many of them also speak too much of Yoruba, honestly. They speak too much of Yoruba. So it was my responsibility to make them speak English as much as possible. And what I used to do at that time was, with the resources I had, I made them watch English movies. Apart from the fact that, okay, English is the language of instruction in classroom, you just have to speak English. I made them watch English movies, and I insisted, just like you, I insisted that they communicate in English. One thing I now did that really helped them was that I told them, don't worry about grammar. Don't worry about making mistakes. Feel free to make mistakes. I won't make fun of you. So I prohibited anybody in my classroom to make fun of another person. So I think I used that method in my English classroom. I also used it in my Yoruba classroom when I was in the US. My students will try to speak Yoruba, and they will fidget. They were worried that, oh, my grammar might not be correct. I will tell them, don't worry about your grammar. So the moment I started with that method, many of them were encouraged to speak, because they knew that they had an environment where nobody was judged. We didn't judge anybody. Speak it. So if you speak it and you made mistake, I only wanted you to communicate. So we focused on content words rather than on grammatical words. I believe that one thing that has worked for me, I believe that many of these students have spoken Yoruba all their lives. So if I wanted to introduce them to English, or I wanted to encourage them to speak in English, I shouldn't bother about correctness. Communication was key. The moment they were able to communicate, every other thing was fine. So I told them, at this level, I don't bother about grammar. So they knew they weren't going to be judged. So they'll say, water, drink, I. So that type of thing really helped us, and many of them began to respond. Many of them began to respond because they know that, no, at this level, I don't worry about grammar. Just communicate, speak in English.
Yeah.
So they watched English movies.
Mm-hmm.
I made them play English games too. We had games, played English games too.
Yeah, in order to construct an idea in English, and we need to teach a few basic grammar topics like tenses, voice, and reported speech. So how do you teach these topics to these young minds in a practical mode?
Okay. So in the case of teaching reported speech, passive and active voice, those ones, we did role play. Most of the time we did role play, where I'll demonstrate, I'll say it, or sometimes I made them watch me say it. I will say it and call them outside. You do this, demonstrate it. Okay, there are 3 students in that classroom yesterday. No, you don't say there are, because it was yesterday. You say there were. There were. So I demonstrate and I correct.
That's real.
So when I demonstrate and they try to do the role play after I've demonstrated, and they make any mistake, I correct in that way. But I don't correct them when they are speaking. They are just speaking freely. I don't correct so that they don't get intimidated.
Yes. Yes, yes, you're right. Thank you so much for giving very valuable insights. So,
Okay. Padmaja, how are you?
I'm fine, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. How are you, ma'am?
I'm good.
My name is Padmaja. I am an 8th grader from Jilla School, Alavaram. I'm so glad to interact with you. Now, I would like to ask you a question. Can I ask, ma'am?
Go ahead, please.
Could you please tell us about your family background?
Okay. I grew up in a family of 5, where I happen to be the first child, and both my parents were teachers. I'm saying were teachers because they are both retired at the moment, though they are alive and they're doing fine. They are both retired. And I grew up at a time when Nigerian teachers were really struggling. Things have improved a little now, but in those days, Nigerian teachers were very poor. I have to be honest with you. So my parents didn't have much to take care of us. And I didn't have the privilege of attending private schools. I attended public schools like every other person, and there were days where I didn't have school uniform. There were days when the food we ate was not enough. And I think that poverty, so to say, was something that motivated me. I knew I wanted to do better than my parents. I knew I have always loved teaching because both my parents were teachers. I loved teaching. I had been teaching since I was young. I would teach my peers, I would teach my juniors in school, but I knew I was going to be a different teacher. So the poverty, the cycle of, the cycle of poverty I saw around, teachers giving birth to children who were also raised in penury, those things were irritable to me. And I decided I was going to make a difference. So as I was growing up and I chose the teaching profession, I told myself that I will go the extra mile. So I would say that I'm not a regular teacher. I'm not an everyday teacher, because an everyday teacher in Nigeria, the regular teacher in Nigeria, is someone who goes to College of Education or University of Education, and after they come back, they get a job and they start teaching, and that is the end. So I decided that this pattern that I saw in the life of my parents was not something I wanted to replicate in my own life. So I decided I wasn't going to be the regular teacher. After I completed my degree in education and I got my teaching job, I took so many other courses. Free courses, paid courses, I attended trainings, I attended webinars, I read books. And from the knowledge, the insights I got from these courses made me to position myself in such a way that opportunities outside the classroom began to locate me. So I would say that if I have some form of financial freedom today, if I have some form of global relevance today, it's not because of my training as a teacher. It's not because of the degree I have as a teacher. It's because of the extra value that I added to myself. So the trainings I took, the courses I took, the books I read, beyond being in the classroom, actually helped me to position myself for opportunities. So somehow, anyhow, I was beginning to attract local opportunities and international opportunities that really helped me financially. And also gave me a bit of global relevance. So it's something I work hard at. I will tell you till today, a lot of Nigerian teachers are comfortable. They are complacent in the classroom. Let me just wait for the salary that the government will give me at the end of the month. And because I knew how difficult things were for my parents, because they only lived on salary, I knew I didn't want that. So I built myself up. I tell you, I took a lot of courses. I tell you, I read a lot of books. And beyond that, I made myself visible on social media. I've leveraged social media. I've used social media to my advantage. So at a point in my teaching career, I began to teach. I was teaching English on social media. I was teaching, and people were noticing me. People beyond the shores of Nigeria were noticing me, and they knew that, oh, to an extent, this person is an expert in this field. So they began to call me. They began to invite me for opportunities that, transformed my life. And people began to show me opportunities, this, that, a lot of opportunities that's actually transformed my life and shot me to the limelight. Is the little relevance I have now, I know is because I have taken my time to go the extra mile than the average Nigerian teacher. And it's really paying off. I don't know whether...
I think I request you to give a message to my students.
Okay. All right. Dear students, I really appreciate you for showing up for this. In fact, I would say that I am quite impressed because when I was invited for this session, I really didn't know that I was coming to meet young learners. So if you could show this type of enthusiasm at this young age, many of you are preteens. From your faces that I could see that many of you are preteens. You are not yet teenagers, or you are in your early teens. If you could have this type of enthusiasm, then it shows that you already have the raw material. The raw material is interest. So the interest is there. All I want to say is that you should keep the fire burning. Don't lose the interest. Like I said, I also had a very humble background. There were days we didn't have enough food to eat. In fact, I used one uniform for 5 years. It tore. My mother mended it. So it was that bad. If I could get to this stage today, by God's special grace, beyond winning the fulbright fellowship, beyond winning the education testing service grants, I've also won some other awards. For example, I was the winner of the African Writers Award in 2020. I was also an academic laurel in Nigeria. So I won that in 2021. If I could come this far, you can go further. And I'm telling you, you possess something I also possess, that curiosity. So that thing that helped me as a child was curiosity, interest, readiness to learn. And it's pushed me forward. You also have that curiosity. You will not be here if you are not curious. You will not be here if you don't have that interest. So you already have the interest. Do not allow anything to discourage you. Do not allow anything to make you want to back out. You have chosen a very good path. This path is a path to greatness. And just so you know, let me tell you this. You are quite young now. You have not started encountering challenges. There are challenges ahead. Let it not be that, oh, nobody warned you. Enjoy your childhood now. By the time the higher you climb on the educational ladder, the more challenges you will encounter. Do not allow challenges to discourage you to go back. Just keep forging ahead. For every challenge you encounter, there is always a way to overcome. You overcome it and you forge ahead. So I hope to see you at the very top in future.